welcome back to another episode of Sidebar Social. I'm your co-host, Jennifer Grinke.
I love that. I'm the host, Dana Stewart. How are you today?
Give me your stardom moment.
I need it. My 15 minutes?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm good. How are you? Are you sleeping? You got the new puppy.
Yeah, new dog. His name's Cosmo.
Okay, how's that going?
He's good. He'll be 16 weeks tomorrow. So I had him for a couple weeks.
Going
My
well,
hands,
okay.
look at my hands. You see all the bite marks?
Yeah.
Yeah, like he's really sweet. And then after like 30 minutes, he literally turns into a gremlin. And he's crazy. And according to AI, it's normal for puppies to get that way. But I haven't had a puppy in 16 years, so I don't remember this.
I don't remember.
And I don't know how to deal with it. I really don't. I'm like, is this guy psychologically off? Like, is he a demon? Like, I don't quite get it. It's crazy how he can be so loving and then crazy in the next moment. So.
Like my suicidal fish.
Yeah, like your fish.
That jumped out of it.
And then disappeared.
Water.
Yes.
Disappeared.
Yes, it's kind of like that. So I don't know, it's mind-boggling. I'm trying to learn. I'm trying to be a good dad dog. But it kind of ties into, on the psychological side, what we're talking about today, because I'm like, does this dog need an eval? So you want to tell the audience what we're talking about today?
Yes. So today we're going to get into forensic and clinical evaluation. So this is something that often will come up maybe in a custody case or in a divorce. And so I'll let you go ahead and introduce our guest today.
Yeah, I mean, it does come up quite a bit, and we can get into what it all is and when to do one or when you should consider. Clinical psychologist Dr. Kevin Goldberg is here. Welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you coming on. Yeah, so as you heard, I'm going to need you to do an evaluation for my dog, Cosmo.
I don't know if I can help with that, but I'll certainly play with your dog.
Okay, he would love that until he turns crazy. So we have a lot of cases where we have to involve some kind of a forensic evaluation, whether it's a child custody eval, a standalone psychological evaluation, or sometimes both of those.
Yeah.
And we see with a lot of our clients or potential new clients, there's a lot of confusion about what that process looks like, what it means, what to expect from it. So we would love if you could help us break that down today.
Absolutely. Where should we start?
Could you tell us just the difference between a clinical and a forensic eval?
Absolutely. So they're two different things, both utilizing psychology, of course. So on the clinical side, that's when we're really looking at diagnostic. What kind of diagnoses are we talking about here? What is it impacting? How is it impacting that person's life? A lot of times when we do a clinical evaluation, we're looking at how does it impact that person's therapy? A lot of times people have been in therapy for a long time, therapy's at a stalemate. The therapist might recommend an evaluation just to see exactly what's going on here. What diagnosis can the therapist not find out that testing can reveal? The forensic side is different. That's when the psychologist acts as a fact finder for the court. So oftentimes the court will say, I just don't know what's going on. Is this party psychologically healthy, or maybe not even healthy, just what is going on psychologically for this individual? And that's when a psychologist comes in, and it's almost investigative through the psychological lens. We'll utilize a lot of techniques like collateral interviews, talking to other people in that person's life, talking to that person extensively, and utilizing psychological instruments to do our best to understand what is going on. And importantly, diagnoses are not always relevant in this case. Diagnoses are relevant for clinical because we can talk about medication, we can talk about certain clinical strategies to help that person. In the forensic world, that's not always the issue. The issue is just what's going on to help the court make the best decision for the kiddos.
So the label's not as important always in the forensic work? Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
And so would an example be for clinical, maybe there's a couple, they're not even going through divorce, but maybe one of the spouses is having some kind of issues, they go in for treatment, they're inpatient somewhere, there would be clinical evaluations done for that person, correct?
Absolutely. For example, within family law context, oftentimes that we're involved, somebody has been involved in an inpatient situation, rightfully, wrongfully, doesn't matter. The court might call a psychologist to say, what exactly is going on here? And within the clinical context, if that person's hospitalized for something like suicidality or homicidal ideation, it's highly likely that the inpatient facility will do psychological testing, and that will be clinical in nature.
Right.
Because they're going to be looking on how can we best help this person? And that's what clinical is looking at too, is best help. In the forensic, it's really best interest of the child.
Right.
Those are the two different standards. And in the forensic, we're all psychologists. We all want to help. The interest is finding out the information to best help the court make the best decision possible.
And in that forensic role, so I think for people that aren't aware, the forensic's going to be litigation purposes, essentially. And do you often, as a forensic evaluator, look to the clinical evals that may have happened before a person comes to you before you're appointed?
Yeah, I think that's probably the most helpful records we can look at is all the past diagnostic evaluations, the clinical evaluations. When people come to see a psychologist in a forensic setting, they're going to put on their best behavior.
Right.
It makes sense. You can't blame anybody for that. When we can look back at past diagnoses, past, chat with a past therapist or even current therapist, and really get a sense of what's going on for this individual. It might be nothing at all. It might be something else that's going on that's impacting their behaviors in a certain way. Well, that's going to be really helpful for the court to know.
Yeah.
And so if we have past diagnoses of anything, that's really going to help inform our decision of, putting the puzzle together of kind of how we got to where we are today.
And so maybe let's talk about the forensic side then, because that's what I think our clients are always interested in, a forensic psychological evaluation. If you have an order that appoints you for that, can you walk us through how do you start the process? How long does it usually take? What is involved in that?
If a court appoints us for a forensic evaluation, first what we'll do is we'll send out some information sheets for the party to fill out. And what we're looking for from this is just basic history. You go to a doctor, you fill out the forms. It's something very similar to that.
Intake paperwork.
Exactly. It's all pretty benign, but take care while filling it out. And then a lot of what we're going to do is interviews. We're going to sit down with you. I'm going to sit down with you for a long time. I just want to talk to you. I want to get to know you. Some of it, it's me trying to understand you from a certain perspective.
Going back to childhood and coming forward?
Yeah. I want to get to know you.
Okay.
And get to know you in a pretty detailed sense. What ticks you off? What makes you excited? What puts you in a good mood, a bad mood? What were your parents like? We'll do that. We'll do some psychological testing. I'm sure a lot of people have heard of the MMPI.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's 500 something questions.
335.
Oh, okay. I exaggerate a little.
And it does a pretty good job of evaluating psychological symptomatology, so just symptoms. And it's also equipped with validity scales. So when someone takes the MMPI, we are able to understand how exactly did this person interact with the measure. Did they try to portray themselves in an overly good behavior, which is very common? Try to portray themselves in an overly negative behavior, can also be common depending on the setting. And then there's a lot of intricacies within that, which can help us really get the viewpoint of that individual. We're going to use that. We're going to do more interviews and collateral information, like we talked about, past diagnostic evaluations, chatting with a therapist, chatting with employers if relevant.
Like family members, maybe?
Family members, looking at, if there's any police records, if there's any CPS records, things like that. We're going to try to look at as much as we can to really understand this individual.
And what about, because I feel like when we have a client who the opposing party, whether it's spouse or ex, is undergoing a psych eval, we normally want the evaluator to speak with our client too, to shed insight as another collateral source. Do you also look to the co-parent in that situation?
It can often depend on the setting. Sometimes that can be helpful and sometimes that can not be helpful, but we're also looking at, if we do, we understand at what point is it helpful and what point is it not helpful.
Yeah.
We're going through a divorce here. If things were amicable, we want to be here.
Right.
Yeah. Follow us and join the conversation on Instagram and YouTube at Sidebar Social. Is there anything that somebody can do or that they should do to prepare before they come in and meet with you for one of these evaluations?
It's really difficult. No, just be honest. And that's obviously easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
But there's no preparation. Don't go looking at videos on what the MMPI is. Don't go looking at whatever you see on YouTube. It's not going to be terribly helpful. Let the psychologist run the show. And at the end of the day, we're all psychologists, right? We're not out here to get you. This is not a pass-fail thing. There's a huge spectrum of what we're looking at. So this isn't acing a test. That's not the purpose of an evaluation. The purpose of an evaluation, especially within the forensic setting, is to help the court make the best decision.
How long does the process typically take? And I understand there's a caveat of collaterals getting back in touch with you timely, things like that. But generally speaking, for a psychological evaluation, what is the time frame for you? Or generally?
It's very hard to say. A lot of things can happen in the middle. You know, a party involved could go inpatient in the middle there. Yeah, there's so much that can happen. It is so hard to say. A psychological evaluation between 4 to 6 months is ideally more than adequate.
Okay.
Ideally. But again, if things were ideal, we might not be in the situation. So it's really hard to say.
How many times do you meet with the person during the course of the evaluation?
That's a good question.
It depends. It depends how many questions I have. At least 2. Most likely 3 to 4.
Okay.
I want to get to see you on different settings. What happens when it's really hot or really cold outside? Sure. Yeah. You know, and really get to know you. Again, it's not a gotcha game. It's not a good cop, bad cop situation here. It's getting to know you.
And at the end of the process, once you've gathered all the data, reviewed everything, then you'll publish a report, correct? Can you talk a little bit about that? What's in the report?
The report is going to give a background of everything I did. It's going to itemize everything I did. What records did I look at? What records did I attempt to get? What records did I get? How many times did I meet with you? For how long? What measures did we do? And it's going to be a narrative of your life, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. It's going to talk about everything that I was able to verify through meeting with you. A lot of people have different views on how long should a report be. Some psychologists think it should be as detailed as possible, and other psychologists think it should be pretty succinct for the court to best understand it. I don't know if there's a right or wrong answer there. I try to go somewhere in the middle. I wanted to be clear of what I did, how I understand this individual from a psychological viewpoint, and I will follow up with recommendations on how to move forward.
So in the forensic work you do, you don't always make a diagnosis, is what I heard you say. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
What do you do with the information that you gather from all the testing and meeting with that person? Like, in what ways is that useful to the court?
So through the evaluation process, again, I'm going to get to know you from point A to point B to point Z, ideally. And if I can understand your triggers, what makes you happy, what makes you sad, what happens when you're sad, what does being sad for you actually look like, and what does being happy for you actually look like. If I can explain all that to the court, it might help the court make a better decision. For example, it might be when I feel that someone doesn't like me, I'm going to withdraw, and I might have to spend a few days in bed. That's going to be really helpful information for a court to know when we're talking about parenting plans.
Right.
Within the context of just psychological testing, oftentimes parenting plans are not a part of that.
Right.
So that's where we stop, but knowing that information is going to be quite helpful.
Right, because what you're saying is in the psych eval, you're not making recommendations for child custody like what you would do in a child custody evaluation,
Correct.
which we can talk about in a minute, but you're giving the data about that person that then the court or the attorneys can use however they need to.
Correct.
So, for example, if there's a small child before the court and your evaluation, forensic evaluation, says something that, the mom does have these depression tendencies where she has to, retreat in bed if something happens for a few days, that could be a situation where the court might say something like, hey, the mom shouldn't have the kid unsupervised, or mom shouldn't have this extended time with the child if she's not getting treatment for that.
It certainly could, because that could obviously be a safety issue for the kiddo.
Yeah.
But in the context of doing a psychological evaluation, you mentioned recommendations. So can you touch on what some of those recommendations might be, just so the audience understands better, kind of what the conclusion of this process would be?
So recommendations might actually look pretty similar to that of a clinical evaluation, in which therapy may be recommended for specific issues. Resources may be recommended. Maybe it's revealed that a job is just too stressful for a person to be the best parent possible and the best employee possible. Maybe there'll be recommendation about, some job skills or transition of a job, things like that, if possible.
Or psychiatrist and maybe meds.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, we get a question a lot where a client or clients have been concerned that their co-parent is going to fool the evaluator. They're going to trick him or her, whoever's doing the evaluation. And so they're hesitant about wanting to even go down the process of an evaluation. Can you speak to that? I don't know if you are aware of this, but us as the family law attorneys, it's something we hear all the time. Oh, my ex is going to fool this evaluator.
So I was talking about the MMPI, and it's equipped with validity scales. So just from my immediate scoring of the MMPI, I'm immediately able to look at how that individual approached the test. Was it completely forthright? Was it not? That's just kind of the first question. There's a bunch of other measures within that to allow us to really look at what was going on through the testing process. Was it valid? Can we even report on this? That's one part. Is it true that someone can tell me whatever they want to tell me in an interview? Of course that's true. But that's also why collateral information can be so helpful. If you tell me one thing and then I have police records or body cam footage of something completely different in the same instance, I'm able to see the discrepancy there.
Or if I tell you I'm the host of this podcast and the records show that it's Jen.
I will go back and look at other podcasts, yeah.
So I've never understood, though. I mean, we've read countless evals. I've never really understood how that MMPI testing works and because I know what you're talking about when we'll scroll through and it'll talk about the validity scale and, they were very defensive on something, but I don't know. Maybe we should take these tests, Jen, and see where yeah, I'm curious about you. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, they are protected.
So, okay. So I guess we have to pay
We'll
the
never
price.
know.
Yeah.
We'll never know. So you talked a little bit about, these measures that are in the testing, and then obviously you look at collaterals to see if what somebody's saying is accurate. If you find out that something is not accurate, what do you then do with that information while the test is still ongoing?
This is why I like to have multiple interviews, because I want to understand that discrepancy. Why is that discrepancy there? In a very heightened emotional time, our memories can be skewed. Body cam footage is going to tell us something different, right? And that's okay. That's actually really helpful for us to understand what does stress look like for you. In other cases, I'm always curious about the discrepancy. Why is that discrepancy there? It's not my immediate assumption that someone's being dishonest. I'm curious about that discrepancy, and that's going to help me in formulating my opinion as well.
So you're not cross-examining the person when
Correct.
you find it, right? But you're exploring it.
Well,
Correct.
we've had situations too where the person actually does view things differently just because they're not self-aware. So that might be their accurate view of what happened, even though 3 other people saw it another way.
Yeah, I like to look at a psychological evaluation either from a forensic or clinical viewpoint of going to the optometrist. When you go to the optometrist, they find your eyeglass prescription. How are you viewing the world? It's very similar to what we do in a psychological evaluation. How are you viewing the world? At what points are we viewing it very clearly? At what At what points are we not? And where's that middle ground?
That's an interesting analogy. I like that.
To connect with today's guest, clinical psychologist Dr. Kevin Goldberg, check out his website, goldbergpsych.com.
So the other context that we see the forensic evaluations come up is within a child custody evaluation, and you also do those as well. Is that right?
Yeah.
So can you talk a little bit about how the forensic evaluation plays into those evaluations sometimes?
So the child custody evaluation is really an evaluation on the family system. How are all these different people interacting with each other? Psychological assessment can be a really crucial part of that. I like to do an evaluation, some psychometric measures on everybody interacting with the kiddo, and sometimes even on the kiddo themselves, to see what are strengths and weaknesses of everybody in that system. Can I get psychometric data? Can I get the testing data to support this or not support this? Whatever comes up. And so a child custody evaluation with accompanying psychological data or testing data can be really, really helpful to really understand the full system, what is really working out here, what is really not working out here. Sometimes a psychological issue is going to show up that is going to impact parenting plans. Sometimes it's not. And that's also helpful too. Sometimes we can just say, parents are both capable of being parents, fully capable. There might be a situational issue. Mom's closer to school. Kid wants to be close to friends. Maybe we'll make a recommendation of something like that. A lot of times it can be more nuanced.
Sure.
Far more nuanced and more than that.
So with a child custody evaluation, though, then you'll have recommendations as well, just like in a psych eval, but those recommendations dive in deeper where you can make the possession and access recommendations, parental rights and duties, which you're the only person as an evaluator who's allowed to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a unique power.
And it is, and it comes along with doing a child custody evaluation. It's regarded as the most complex psychological evaluation a psychologist can do, period.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It's just a really complex process. We are looking at everything. A psychological evaluation looking at one individual is a lot in itself. This time we're looking at 3, 4, 5, 6 people if we're talking about, step parents and things like that. It's a really complicated process. And it's a way for the court to get, to be a fly on the wall in the house. With a child custody evaluation, we're able to observe parents with the children. What does it look like? We'll have parents and children do activities together. That's always fun. What does this look like? What does the home look like? What's going on for each parent? What's this whole process like for them? Obviously, it's not fun, but how can we make the best recommendations possible?
We had a child custody evaluation once where the evaluator walked in and there was a 4-foot bong on the living room table. And the kids were playing right next to it. So I would imagine that's probably frowned upon in your world, right?
I don't know if it's just my world.
In the evaluator world, I mean, yeah. What are some things that people can do? So if they are going to go through a child custody evaluation, I know Jen asked you, what should somebody do or not do for a psych eval? Is there anything that would help you as the evaluator for a parent to do leading into the child custody evaluation process?
I hate to say it because it sounds counterintuitive, but trust the process. It's a lengthy process. It's frankly an intrusive process. Or the court has ordered us to look at the system inside and out.
Right.
Kind of allow us to do that. It's not fun, frankly, and it's scary. We're talking about children here, and that, our own children. It's not fun, but to trust the process, and us as evaluators, again, it's not a gotcha game. A really important part of a forensic evaluation, whether that be a psychological evaluation or child custody evaluation, is for the examiner to be aware of their own biases throughout. And we take a lot of different measures throughout each evaluation to mitigate our own bias. So this is really not a gotcha game. It's really how can we best provide information to the decision maker, the court?
Yeah, I've wondered about that because it seems like it would be easy, maybe for me, because I'm not trained the way you are to do these, but to early on have a thought of like, oh, this parent is a problem parent, and then seek out the data that supports that. So you're saying you've done a lot of training, or you're very aware of that to try to stay neutral or view it through a neutral lens.
And it's not that I might not have that thought, but I'm certainly going to challenge that thought.
Okay.
And I'm going to work really hard to challenge that thought. What am I not looking at here? So I can't control what thoughts I have or what thoughts I don't have, but I am, as a psychologist, I'm very trained to be aware of my thoughts. And so how can I challenge this? What is there a part of the picture here I'm not seeing?
Yeah.
And what is that? Oh, here's that part of the picture. Okay, that makes a lot more sense now.
Got it.
Play it from all different sides. It's a really important part of an evaluator because fairness is key here. Mom didn't hire me, dad didn't hire me, the court hired me. So I need to be as objective as humanly possible.
How much weight do you give to whatever it is that the children are telling you that they want?
It's very context dependent. How old is the kid? Where does that kid's boyfriend or girlfriend live? but also everything down to how much candy is the kid getting at a certain home.
Yeah.
Right.
So it's really hard to say. We know that kids cannot make these decisions on their own. If they could, there would be no need for a child custody evaluation. So it's very important to talk to the kid. I like to get to know kids. I love playing with kids. And what kids say is a data point, but it's not the only data point.
Right. And then the process for a child custody evaluation, in our experience, takes time, many, many months. So I guess for people at home, if you are entering the process, or if you are thinking about it, you're already in it, and you've got questions about whether a psychological evaluation and child custody evaluation may be appropriate, you need to speak with your attorney quickly, because if you wait too long to request one, the judge may deny it, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, you'll run out of time.
Yeah, because the court's going to say, I'm not going to postpone trial another 8 months to do these evals, and you had a window of opportunity to do it, and you didn't ask for it.
And I think we've said this before, but the child custody evaluator, as long as they've followed the family code, they're the only person who can make the recommendation to the court on possession and access of the children. So if that is an issue in your case, and you know that that's going to be a fight going to trial, these can be very useful tools.
Agreed. And where I think it's also helpful, and I don't know if you ever thought about it this way, Kevin, but for us, like if we go to court for a hearing, we're going to get limited amount of time. We're also limited by the rules of evidence of what data the judge is going to hear. But you as the evaluator can spend months getting to know the family. The rules of evidence don't apply in a custody evaluation. So I think for some people, it's hard to tell their story in a 1 hour or 2 hour trial, whatever it might be. But they can spend that time with you and let you get to know them, get to know the family dynamic, and that's going to give so much more insight to the judge.
Yeah, I think there's an element where a child custody evaluation can be a legal strategy.
Like I've had things come up where it's like, okay, now this kid needs this special tutoring, or this kid needs this therapy.
Yeah, like ABA therapy.
It's not just the possession and access. It can be so much more than that.
Yeah, ordering parents to do co-parenting therapy.
Yeah.
And things like, we see that a lot come as a recommendation from you.
Parenting facilitation.
Anger management class.
Yes, all those things. So is there anything else that you can think of about evals that we've not touched on that you think might be helpful for the audience to know?
I think if it's your first time going through an evaluation process, whatever you've heard of, whatever you've seen online, whatever you've seen about movies about a psychological evaluation, there's a more likely than not chance it's not true.
You mean what's out there on the internet isn't true?
It's amazing. It's amazing. So trust the process with the evaluator. If you have questions, speak to your attorney. But pop culture loves to make my world seem far different than what it is. So allow that to not be part of your evaluation process.
Trust the process.
It's the process.
All right. Well, Kevin, thank you for coming on.
Yeah,
We really
thank you.
appreciate all the information and insight. It's very valuable for us and for our audience.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, everyone. We'll see you next time on Sidebar Social.